Rain fell in steady sheets against the glass walls of the Atlanta train station, painting everything in gray and gold reflections. The air smelled of wet pavement, coffee, and impatience. People hurried across the platform, shaking off umbrellas and clutching briefcases, their faces buried in phones. Among the chaos, Danielle Porter wove her way through the crowd, her heart pounding in rhythm with her footsteps. She was soaked to the skin, her black curls sticking to her forehead. But she didn't care. She was late, and this train was her only way home. The folder pressed tightly against her chest was her lifeline, filled with resumes, recommendation letters, and every shred of proof that she was still trying. She had spent the last few hours in a long interview at Whitmore Industries, one of the most respected companies in the city. It was the first real opportunity she'd had in months. She had worn her best blouse, even though the collar was slightly frayed, and borrowed shoes from her cousin because hers had holes in the soles. The interview had gone well, or at least she thought so. They'd said they'd be in touch. Now she just wanted to get home, crawl into bed, and hope for good news. Last call for Train 47 to Savannah. Doors closing in 1 minute, the announcement blared overhead. Danielle's eyes widened. That was her train, her only train. If she missed it, she'd be stuck here for hours, and she didn't have the money for another ticket or even a sandwich. Her rent was overdue, her phone bill unpaid, and her fridge was nearly empty. Everything inside her screamed to run. She pushed through the crowd, dodging commuters and luggage, her shoes squeaking against the wet floor. The train was visible now, silver, sleek, and waiting. The door lights flashed yellow, warning that they were about to close. Danielle clutched her folder tighter, her breath shallow, her pulse hammering in her ears. Almost there, just a few more steps. Then it happened. A faint cry, fragile and cracking with age, rose above the hum of the station. "Miss, please, help me!" Danielle froze. The sound came from somewhere behind her. She turned her head and saw him. An old man standing near a bench, struggling to stay upright. His cane had fallen, and his grocery bag had split open, spilling apples, bread, and a carton of milk across the floor. The milk had burst, leaving a white puddle that spread around his shoes. People walked around him as if he wasn't even there. No one stopped. Her heart twisted. The man looked terrified and helpless, one hand braced against the wall, the other reaching toward his scattered groceries. His clothes were simple and soaked through, his hands shaking. Danielle looked back toward the train. The doors were closing. She could still make it if she ran. Her mind raced. If she missed the train, she'd have to wait 2 hours. That meant getting home close to midnight, and she had to be up early to check on her neighbor's kids before school. She didn't have the money to take a cab, and she definitely couldn't afford to be late again. Her landlord had made it clear he was done being patient. For one long, painful moment, she stood frozen between two choices: her own life or someone else's need. The whistle blew. The train doors began to slide shut. Danielle dropped her folder to the floor, spun on her heel, and ran toward the old man. "Hold on, sir. I'm coming!" The train doors clanged closed behind her. The sound hit her chest like a punch. She'd missed it. She didn't even look back. "Let's get you sitting down," she said gently, bending to pick up his apples. They rolled away, slick with rainwater, bumping into the wall and her shoes. Her knees soaked through as she knelt on the cold floor, gathering each one carefully. The old man's breathing was uneven, shaky with effort. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to make you stop." "It's okay," she said softly. "You just slipped, that's all. Happens to everyone." When she finished picking up his groceries, she noticed that one of his hands was bleeding slightly. A small scrape from the fall. She tore a corner from an old tissue in her pocket and gently dabbed the blood away. Then she helped him to his feet, steadying his arm until he was balanced. He smiled faintly, his eyes glistening under the dim platform lights. "You're an angel," he whispered. Danielle laughed quietly, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "I'm just someone who can't walk past a mess, I guess." She guided him to a bench beneath the shelter of the platform roof and sat beside him. The rain outside had turned into a soft drizzle, but the cold breeze still swept through the open space, chilling her skin. Her clothes clung to her body, heavy with rainwater. She rubbed her arms and exhaled slowly, watching her breath fog in the air. "Did you miss your train?" the man asked gently. Danielle's eyes drifted toward the empty tracks. "Yeah," she said, the word catching in her throat. "But that's all right. There'll be another one." He nodded slowly, looking at her with a quiet understanding that felt almost fatherly. "Not many people would have stopped," he said. "Everyone's always in such a hurry." She smiled, though her heart ached. "Maybe they just didn't hear you." "Oh, they heard me," he said with a small chuckle. "They just didn't want to get involved." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the steady patter of rain against metal. Danielle thought about the interview again. How nervous she had been, how much she wanted to impress them. She wondered if missing this train somehow meant something. Maybe the universe was playing another cruel joke on her, another reminder that no matter how hard she tried, she always seemed to fall short. But when she looked at the old man beside her, clutching his repaired grocery bag, something in her softened. Maybe life wasn't always about getting somewhere on time. Maybe sometimes it was about being there when someone else needed you. The man glanced down at her folder resting on the bench. "That looks important," he said. "Yeah," she sighed. "Job applications. I've been trying to find steady work for a while now. Today was a big interview." He smiled knowingly. "You'll get it. People like you always do." She laughed lightly. "People like me? The kind who stop to help," he said. "Kindness is rare. Employers might look at skills, but the right people look at heart." Danielle's throat tightened. No one had said something kind to her in weeks. "Thank you," she whispered. He stood slowly, gripping his cane again. "You did a good thing today." "Don't ever doubt that." She nodded, watching him walk toward the exit, his steps slow but steady. As he disappeared into the crowd, she sat there for a long moment, the sound of rain filling the silence around her. The platform was nearly empty now. A cleaner passed by with a mop, humming a tune, and the lights flickered slightly. Danielle looked down at her soaked folder and smiled faintly. Maybe this wasn't the end of her day. Maybe it was the start of something she couldn't yet see. She leaned back on the bench, closed her eyes, and let the rain's rhythm calm her thoughts. She didn't know it yet, but this small act, choosing compassion over convenience, would become the turning point of her life. 2 days had passed since Danielle missed her train. The rain had stopped. The skies over Atlanta had cleared, but her heart still felt heavy. She sat in a small diner near her apartment, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and the smell of frying bacon hanging permanently in the air. The tables were old, the vinyl seats cracked, but it was warm and quiet. A cup of coffee sat in front of her, half finished and already cold. She stirred it absent-mindedly, watching the cream swirl into soft shapes that faded almost as soon as they formed. She hadn't been able to sleep much. Her mind kept replaying that night. The rush to the train, the old man's trembling hands, and the sound of the doors closing as her chance disappeared. The next day, she had called Whitmore Industries to check on her interview status, but no one picked up. Every unanswered ring felt like another door shutting in her face. Now, she sat by the window, watching people walk past on the wet sidewalk, their laughter and energy so far from how she felt. She had dressed neatly, as if somehow looking put together would help her believe she still had a chance at something better. Her phone lay face down on the table. No new messages, no calls. The waitress, a woman named Joy, who had known Danielle for years, came by and refilled her cup. "You look like you've been thinking too hard again," she said with a grin. Danielle smiled weakly. "Maybe I have." "Still nothing from that job?" She shook her head. "No, but I'll figure something out." Joy patted her shoulder. "You always do." Danielle wanted to believe that. But lately, she wasn't so sure. She'd been trying for so long, trying to stay positive, trying to keep her dignity, trying not to lose hope. The city could be cruel when you didn't have money. Opportunities felt like distant lights. Beautiful, but always out of reach. She was about to take another sip of coffee when the diner door swung open with a soft jingle. A gust of cold air swept in, carrying the smell of wet pavement. She barely looked up at first, expecting another group of customers. But then she heard a voice she recognized instantly. Danielle, her head snapped up. Standing in the doorway was the same old man from the train station, the one she had helped when he fell. Only this time he looked completely different. His coat was pressed, his shoes polished, and his posture straight and confident. Beside him stood two younger men in suits, one carrying a briefcase. For a moment, Danielle just stared, unsure if she was imagining it. "Sir?" she said softly. "What are you doing here?" The man smiled, the same warm, kind smile she remembered from that rainy night. "I've been looking for you," he said, walking toward her table. "You left in such a hurry the other evening. I didn't get your name." Danielle stood, unsure of what to do. "It's Danielle Porter. I'm sorry. I didn't expect to see you again." He nodded. "Charles Whitmore." Her mouth fell open slightly. "Wait, Whitmore, as in Whitmore Industries?" He chuckled. "The very same." Danielle's breath caught in her throat. The folder she had carried that night, the interview she'd been praying about. It was for his company. The man she had helped was the one whose name was printed at the top of every building she passed on her commute. "I can't believe this," she said quietly. "You're the one who—" He raised a hand gently, smiling. "The one who fell and made a mess in front of 100 people? Yes, that was me. And you're the only one who stopped to help." She felt her cheeks warm. Anyone would have done the same. He shook his head. "No, they wouldn't have. I saw it. I was standing there for several minutes before you came. People saw me. They just kept walking. But you didn't." Danielle didn't know what to say. Her heart was racing again. But this time it wasn't from panic. It was disbelief. "I was at the office the next day," Charles continued, "and your name came up in one of our final applicant reviews. I looked at your file, and something told me to meet you again in person." He pulled out a small envelope and placed it on the table. Danielle stared at it, her hands trembling slightly. "What is this?" "Your official offer letter," he said with a grin. "You're hired, Danielle. We want you at Whitmore Industries." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. "You're serious?" "As serious as I've ever been," he said. "We need someone in our community outreach division. Someone with empathy, patience, and real heart. Qualities that can't be taught in a classroom. What you did the other night proved you have them." Danielle pressed a hand to her mouth. She could barely breathe. It didn't feel real. It felt like a dream she was afraid to wake up from. "Mr. Whitmore, I don't know what to say," she stammered. "I thought missing that train ruined my chance." He smiled softly. "Sometimes missing one thing means you're meant to find something better. You gave up your opportunity that night for a stranger, but that act of kindness opened another door. One that was waiting for you." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't expect something good to come out of it." Charles placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Goodness always finds its way back. It may take time, but it does." He turned to the men behind him. "Gentlemen, this is the new head of our outreach initiative. Make sure she gets everything she needs, an office, transportation, whatever it takes." The men nodded respectfully. One handed her a card with contact information. As Charles stood to leave, he paused and looked at her one last time. "I meant what I said the other night. Kindness isn't wasted. You reminded me of that." When he and his assistant stepped outside, the diner fell silent again. Danielle stood there for a long moment, her hands still gripping the offer letter. Joy, the waitress, approached with wide eyes. "Girl," she said, breaking into a grin. "Did I just hear that right? You got hired by Whitmore?" Danielle laughed through her tears. "Yeah," she said, wiping her cheeks. "I guess I did." Joy shook her head in amazement. "And here I was about to tell you to stop worrying so much." Danielle sat back down, still in shock. She opened the envelope carefully, reading every word. Her name was printed clearly: Danielle Porter, Community Outreach Coordinator. Salary, benefits, everything she had been praying for. She leaned back, staring out the window as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds. For the first time in months, she felt light, like she could finally breathe again. Outside, the streets sparkled under the sunlight, the puddles reflecting gold. A group of children ran past the window, splashing in the water and laughing. Danielle smiled. 2 days ago, she had thought she'd lost everything, but now she realized something deeper. That every act of kindness, no matter how small, carries a ripple that returns when you least expect it. Missing that train had felt like the end, but in truth, it had been the beginning. As she took a slow sip of her coffee, now perfectly warm again, "Somehow," she whispered to herself, "sometimes you have to miss your train to find your destiny." And this time, she believed it with all her heart.